Tried to donate a kidney. Everybody loves you and you're such a hero. But try donating 5 kidneys, and all of a sudden everybody's screaming and calling the cops. What up, YouTube? Let's hear. Thanks again for visiting the channel. As always, I appreciate it. If this is your first time to the channel, thank you so much for watching. Please go ahead and just hit that thumbs up button just for the algorithm. And if you enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. I don't know if I said anything to you guys before, but if you haven't noticed, I've been going back to kind of like the cleaner, safer dad jokes, just because now I'm discussing with different companies, different organizations, sending me stuff, swag and stuff to send along with my giveaway things. So, you know, having those people having to associate themselves with my channel, there's a few that have expressed concerns about, you know, some of the content that I put out there being less than couth, I guess would be the right word. So I'm just being a little bit more family friendly, just so that I don't offend anyone, and nobody else that is associating themselves with me has to worry about that. I feel like that's a fair request, and I'm more than happy to honor that, especially if it helps to grow the channel a little bit more. Also, I am at about, there's about 80 more subscribers till our next giveaway comes up. So I'm 80 away from 700, which is very, very exciting. I never expected to get to, you know, multi-hundred subscribers, let alone 700, which I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there closer and closer every day. So really, guys, I can't thank you enough. The amount of support for this channel has just been overwhelming, and I really love it. I love doing this. I love conversing with you guys and interacting with you, and especially when I do the lives. It's a lot of fun, and you guys are freaking awesome. So just thank you so much for the support, and thanks for sticking with me through the highs and lows of this channel. I really appreciate that. But today we're doing a quick review on the Winterblade Co Factor, which I got from the Apex Pass Around group. So let's do it up, y'all. First things first, we'll do all the measurements and specs on this guy real quick. This knife is 7 inches overall, just a hair over. I think it's like 7.125 inches overall, with a blade length, a hair under 3 inches. Depends on where you go. If you go by this part of the blade, it's right around 3 inches. If you go by this part, then it's a hair under 3 inches. And a cutting edge of 2.5 inches with a handle length of 4.25 inches. As you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of smaller knives, but this one, I'm sure, as you know, if you don't already know about this knife, you'll figure it out pretty quick. But if you do know about this knife already, I think most people will understand that it's got enough interesting aspects to it to make me, you know, look past the fact that it's such a small knife. It's a little bit dirty, so I'm just going to clean it off here. But yeah. This is a fantastic knife. I love it. It's very, very fidgety. I really enjoy playing with it. It's a super fantastic, awesome, expeditious knife. We'll do some quick size comparisons here compared to the excuse me, Rat Model 1. The Rat's obviously going to be quite a bit longer than the Winterblade Co Factor, and the Rat Model 2. Let's see here. Yeah, that's just a hair longer than the Factor as well. So yeah, as you can see, not exactly a super big knife, but it's got enough interesting factors that it, oh, there you go, to make it interesting enough to want to check it out here. The 8020S, obviously quite a bit longer than the Factor, and the 20.5 is a little bit longer than the Factor as well. Last but not least, we've got the SPYDERCOs. The SPYDERCO Paramilitary 2, probably going to be quite a bit longer than the Factor. Yep. And the Pair 3, I'm guessing, is going to be pretty close. Yeah, it's just a hair longer than the Factor as well. Carry profile. Let's get these guys closed real quick. I don't know why I say that every time. I'm sorry. The Paramilitary 2 is going to be quite a bit longer when it's closed, and the Pair 3 is a hair longer as well when they're both closed. Thickness, real quick. The Pair 3 is just a little bit thicker than the Factor. And the height on this knife, let's try to go by the tallest point, which would be that part of the blade there. looks like they're pretty close to the same. I'd say the Parrot 3 is maybe just a hair taller on that tall part of the blade there. Can't check the blade stock thickness just because my calipers are on the fritz, but trust me when I tell you the blade stock thickness on this guy is 124 thou. Let's go ahead and check the weight on this guy real quick. I think it was like 4.3 ounces. No, 3.3 ounces, I'm sorry. So this is a very lightweight knife, which I enjoy quite a bit. It doesn't take up a whole lot of room in the pocket, and it's very easy to carry. Oh, did you hear that? The ting on this knife is fantastic. I absolutely love it. So we're looking at a blade steel of M390. You guys know how I feel about M390. I don't feel like it belongs on everything. It is a fantastic steel. It's got, you know, probably the best balance of all three factors that we look at. Edge retention, toughness, and corrosion resistance. It's not quite so high on toughness, but you know, we're not doing crazy stuff out there with our knives, guys. And I'm not really calling for MagnaCut either. I couldn't care less about MagnaCut. I think we, you know, passed the point of blade steel that we needed a really long time ago. I feel like for everyday use, the stuff that most people in the knife community use their knives for, I think that you can get away with no problem at all with S30V or S35VN or S45VN if you're looking more towards more corrosion resistance, but that's really all we need. And yes, it's fun and it's exciting to have the newest best steel in the community and everything like that. But we're kind of just, you know, we're kind of just forcing things upon ourselves that we don't really need. You know, MagnaCut's fantastic, yeah, but what do we really need MagnaCut for? MagnaCut's a good steel. It's a great steel. But it's just kind of like, you know, wearing body armor to go to work every day. It doesn't make any sense. It's nice to have, but it's not something that we need. So I feel like we could be using less expensive steels on premium knives and have the steel where we want it. You know, unless obviously you're looking for a specific blade steel type for one reason or another. And then you've got, you know, DEMKO and Damasteel and stuff like that. Those are just things that cater more to our, you know, aesthetic preferences. Yeah, they're good steels, and the you know, the proprietary I don't want to say garbage Damascus out there, but the more expensive, the more attainable Damascus, it's still a pretty good steel, but you don't really need it. It's just for the aesthetic factor of having the beautiful blade steel and being able to look at it and keep it clean, and just everybody's like, oh, that's really cool looking. What's that? That's why we want those on our knives. We don't need those on our knives. That ended up coming out really long-winded. I apologize. I don't I don't know, guys. So anyway, blade steel M390. This profile, I'm not sure what to call this exactly. I don't know if it's a reverse Tanto or sheep's foot, modified Wharncliffe. I'm going to go ahead and call it a reverse Tanto. Just, you know, that's just me. If anybody else wants to call it something different, that's not a problem. Don't attack me because I'm giving the wrong blade profile here. We've got a full flat grind, which makes this a very, very slicey knife. It's super cool. I really love this knife a lot. Let's check the blade or the balance here real quick. The balance on this knife is just a little further back from the pivot that we're used to. So I guess this knife might be a little bit butt heavy. I'm not sure if that has to do with the magnets or you know, this extra piece here that sets up in the back. The pocket clip, I'm not sure exactly what makes it a little bit butt heavy, but it is a little bit butt heavy. Not to the point where it's uncomfortable or anything like that. It doesn't feel bad in the hand at all. The balance doesn't really seem to make too big of a difference with this knife. As far as hardware is concerned, we are looking at flathead screw for the pivot, and you've got T6 screws everywhere else, which T6 screws aren't exactly awesome to see. But I think this was one of the first versions of the Factor that came out. He might be using T8s on them now. I'm not sure. But the T6s aren't a huge deal. They're not a deal killer for this knife. It's interesting enough that it doesn't really matter what the hardware size is. People are interested enough in it to want to buy this anyway. This is absolutely running on bearings. You can see it's very, very smooth. Doesn't matter if you deploy it with the reverse Spidey flick, the thumb flick. You can slow roll it, or you can use the push bar. I don't know exactly what they call that, but very easy to deploy, very easy to disengage. There's no lock stick on this guy whatsoever, and it's the action on this guy is very, very smooth. You have a very large pivot here with a G10 inlay in there, and you've also got a G10 inlay that sits inside this little lock stud here. Titanium scale on the show side, which is not skeletonized at all, and you've got a carbon fiber scale on the lock side, and you have a milled titanium pocket clip here, which is a very nice pocket clip. I like that a lot. This push bar here to deploy the blade, this is made out of G10 as well. And it's very comfortable to deploy and to disengage. You don't have to move your hand around to deploy it or engage it. It works absolutely fantastic. I think that the time that I'm not sure what his name is, but Mr. Winter, I'm sure the time he put into designing this knife, I'm sure he's satisfied with that, because he made a very, very fidget-friendly knife and a very easy knife to use for sure. What else is there to say? So, as you guys know, this is probably one of the most popular knives in the knife community these days, just because it's so different. Everything is controlled by magnetic. Everything has been controlled by magnets. The D10 is magnetic. The lockup is not magnetic, but it's controlled by magnets. And when the blade is back into the handle, it's controlled by magnets there as well. I'll go into that in just a little bit. The ergonomics on this knife are fantastic as well. We've got this very simple open construction. There's not a whole lot of milling here to force your fingers into one area or another. And you do have a nice large finger choil there, so that you can use that to choke up on the knife if you'd like to. While you're holding this knife in standard hammer grip, which is basically the only way to hold it, either choked up or just the standard grip, it's very, very comfortable. There's no hot spots or anything like that. And you can still, even when you're holding it in the standard grip, you can still get pretty close to that blade and get your thumb up there on the side of the blade, on the spine of the blade, for some extra control if you need to. As far as jimping, there is no jimping on this knife at all, but I don't feel like it needs any. Like I said, when you're choked up or in the standard grip, you've got a lot of control here, and this thing is locked in. It's not going anywhere. The price on this guy, I think, is like $350 to $375 when they're available, which right now, unfortunately, they are not. I think his name's Todd. Todd Winters does drops every once in a while. He advertises them on his website, on YouTube, and on Instagram. So it's not hard to find out when he's going to be doing drops, and he usually does pre-orders. So it's not exactly difficult to get one of these knives. You just have to be ready when they pop up and are available. I think the biggest hindering factor with these things is the price. They're a little bit expensive, but in my opinion, they're definitely well worth it. Now, as far as the way the knife makes me feel, I'll tell you, I can look at this knife on paper and read all the things about it, and then when I get to the point where it says that there's a 2.5-inch blade on it, I'm out. Hard pass, no thank you. I don't get interested or excited about blades, sub 3-inch blades. I think most of the knives in my collection are at the very least 3.5-inch blade, if not 4-inch blades. I have a few that are like 3.35 or 3.4, but those are knives that were very, very interesting to me initially. And so if I hadn't seen those, I probably would have at least had to do a lot of research on them to see if I would want to have them. But as far as this knife is concerned, the interest factor, or the aesthetics of this knife, were enough to make me really interested in it before I even knew what the blade length was. So when I found out that it was 2.5 inches, it wasn't that big of a deal to me. Probably one of the biggest drawing factors, that people don't really talk about as much with this knife, is the acoustics. And for the new people out there, I'm sure you're thinking, acoustics? What are you talking about? Acoustics don't have anything to do with pocket knives. Yes, they do. At least when you're crazy, or as crazy as I am about knives, they do. So I don't know if you can hear or not. I'll get it as close to the camera as I can. So if you can hear that ting, The acoustics of this knife are one of the biggest things that draw people to it. They just love the way that it sounds. Now, if you're not a knife nut, if you're not insane about knives, it's just annoying. My wife absolutely hates this knife. When are you sending that back? But I love it, and all the other knife guys that I talked to, you know, I was doing a live the other day, and I started flipping this open and closed, and the guy's like, "Oh, I love that knife. I got to get my hands on one." Yeah, people in the knife community, they just love this knife, and it's not just because of the acoustics. There's other things about this thing that are really, really interesting. First of all, you know, obviously the magnets. Mr. Winters has to have some kind of a weird, you know, just, I don't want to say crazy, but he has to have some kind of a different brain, you know, when you're sitting there looking at a pocket knife and trying to consider something to make it stand out from every other pocket knife in the world. Who thinks, you know what this thing needs? It needs some magnets. I can't imagine who would think that way, but he did, and thank goodness that he did. This thing is fantastic. It's so cool. So I guess the starting process on this thing, he was trying to come up with a different locking system, and he decided to come up with this guy right here, which is the push bar lock, or you know, whatever he calls it. I'm not sure exactly what he calls it, but he developed the lock, and they put it into a SPYDERCO Tenacious, and it worked really, really well for them. So they decided to go with that, and then they built this knife around the deployment mechanism, which right off the bat there, you're going to have something very, very interesting, because nobody does that. Normally, they come up with a knife design, and they decide what kind of locking mechanism they want to have in it, and then they just build, you know, whatever locking mechanism they want to have into the knife. So right away, you know, coming up with a deployment method and then building a knife around that, you're going to come up with something really interesting and new and special. And that's what happened with this knife. You know, it's been, you know, people have been raving about this knife ever since he first released it. Metal Complex obviously gave it raving reviews. Nick Shabazz really enjoyed it when he first got it. So, you know, between them and just the weird factor with this knife, get it, weird factor. I think it just drew a lot of people in. Now, you know, that's not going to cut the mustard. You can't just get a great knife just off of that. You also have to have, you know, a good design, and it has to function. It has to work really, really well. And luckily for him, it does. I mean, this thing is a fidget machine. You can flick it open, flick it closed over and over and over and over and over and over and over again all day long. This thing is so much fun to play with. And I know you're not supposed to play with knives, but you know what I mean. As far as the mechanical aspects of this thing, so the detent is magnetic, and by that I mean you've got these magnets in here. You can see those down inside the scales there. So you've got one on this side and one on this side, and then you've got these little bumpers here behind it. So another nice thing about this knife is when it's inside the handle, you know, those magnets and those bumpers keep it centered. So you don't really have to worry about this thing being centered at all. As far as how this thing works, when you push this, it thrusts the blade out enough to where it locks up, and then it just hangs out down here. Now, when I first saw it, I kind of wondered. I'm like, you know, why doesn't it just sit, you know, like right here, like where it's waiting to deploy the knife? So I took this thing out and I took a look at it, and you've got another magnet here. Which obviously keeps that where it's supposed to be when it's not being used. And I don't know if I can get, you know, I don't know if I can make it so that you can see it, but there is another magnet right here on the lock side scale. So that obviously keeps this thing where it's supposed to be. And the more I thought about it, you know, when you disengage this thing, a lot of times with locks like this, you'll have the blade swing down and bounce. It kind of bounces back out. So I guess, you know, this thing being here, I don't know if that's how they intended it or not, But that kind of just, it's just enough to like slow the blade down enough to where it kind of just rests back down on where the D10 is supposed to be. So maybe that's why they did that. I don't know for sure. But it works really, really well. And then there's also another magnet in here which controls this guy. I'm not sure exactly where it is or how it functions. I don't want to take the knife apart to see it, but you know, when the blade comes out, this guy slides forward, and then when you pull it back, it's kind of like a partial crossbar lock or a partial axis lock. So there's only this part on the one side. There's nothing here on the other side. But again, it functions perfectly. You just pull it back, the blade falls back down into the handle, and you're done. A nice thing about this guy, let me get this other knife out to show you here. So this is the knife that I'm going to be giving away when I get to 700 subscribers. Very, very nice knife. The Kaiser Escort. Awesome knife. So as far as with the crossbar lock, there is a small problem. I don't know if I'd call it a problem. It's just the nature of the beast. You're going to have issues that may or may not affect the function of the knife. When you pull this back, obviously it unlocks the blade. But if you keep it held back, it can't close all the way. So when you release it, it'll go back in. But if you don't get the timing right, it'll cause the blade to bounce back out. I can't get it to happen now, but yeah, it just happened there. So yeah, if you keep this down, sometimes it will cause the blade to bounce back out, and then it won't close all the way, because you've got this part here which rides against the tang of the blade and causes this button to swing back and forth. So that causes a little bit of resistance, so the blade doesn't just fall into the handle if that happens. They seem to have gotten around that with this particular crossbar here, and I don't want to call it a crossbar lock, it's just kind of like a half a crossbar lock. But even if you had this pulled back all the way, that doesn't happen, and the magnets capture it. So it seems like this thing is engineered a little bit better, just because you don't have that issue where if you don't get your thumb out of the way fast enough, the blade's going to bounce back out. It's much easier to close this guy and get it back into the handle than it is with the standard crossbar lock. So that's just another way that this knife is such a fun, fidgety knife. It does happen, but it doesn't happen anywhere near as often as it does with the full crossbar lock. So yeah, this knife is very fidgety, very comfortable in the hand, and it's very, very interesting to look at. Everybody that I've shown this knife to has just been really interested in taking a look at it and playing with it. And sometimes I'll say, with people, I'll give them a knife like the Super Freak, and they're interested in it, but it takes them a little while to really figure out how to work the lock, to get to the point where they can deploy it and close it without the blade like not closing all the way or something like that, and then they get scared because they don't want to touch it. That doesn't really seem to happen with this knife. People have looked at this knife and they figured out how to deploy it, figure out how to disengage it, and then they can just play with it, and it's fun, and it's they don't have to worry about having to touch the blade or anything like that. So it's also a very user-friendly knife. I think that's one of the biggest things about this that has made it so popular, is the fact that it's so fidgety and so much fun to play with, but it's also such a user-friendly knife. Another thing that somebody else said something about, maybe you can lift this up and like cut cigars with this and stuff like that, or maybe use it as a strap cutter. I don't know if he had that in mind when he designed this, or if that's just a side effect of making the knife the way that it is. But again, this is just a very interesting knife, and it's probably one of the most interesting knives that's come out in the last couple of years. So good for Mr. Winter. He's hit the jackpot here. Very interesting EDC knife, very good size. A little smaller for me than I prefer, but for most people, this is a good size knife. It's not too big, it's not too small. They can carry it without any problem. And I think that's why most people in the knife community these days love this knife so much. Also, there's the it's so modifiable. You can get different colored little pieces of G10 to put in here and here. You can get a different colored piece of G10 to put here. You can do different things with the carbon fiber side. You can use fat carbon or something like that. You can do cross cut. There's so many different things that you can do with this knife to make it your own. So I think that's another thing that makes this knife so popular. So I think that's it for today, guys. I don't think that there's anything else to say about this one. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And stay up, y'all. Take it easy. Bye.